The room buzzed with anticipation as the New York skyline shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Waldorf Astoria ballroom. The evening was a perfect blend of extravagance and exclusivity, just as Alex Kingston preferred. The billionaire CEO, known for his razor-sharp business acumen and an unrelenting charm, stood near the bar, his tailored navy suit hugging his tall, athletic frame. Tonight was not about deals or profits. It was about celebrating the start of his next chapter, his wedding to the glamorous socialite Lauren Vanderlei. But despite the champagne glasses clinking and the swirl of music from the live quartet, Alex's mind wasn't on the festivities. His eyes darted toward the entrance, his stomach tightening every time the massive oak doors creaked open. She might not come, he told himself, for the 100th time that evening. Yet he knew Sophie Bennett well enough to expect the unexpected. Sophie had been his everything once. The girl next door turned marketing prodigy had stolen his heart when they were just two ambitious 20-somethings navigating the chaos of New York. She had been his grounding force in a world of dizzying success, but ambition had come between them, tearing their love apart. That was 5 years ago, and now, as he prepared to marry Lauren, he had taken the gamble of inviting Sophie to the wedding. Why he had done it, even he wasn't entirely sure. Closure, perhaps? Or maybe deep down he wanted to see if she had moved on as completely as he pretended to have done. When the doors finally opened, Alex's glass slipped slightly in his grip. Sophie stepped inside, wearing a crimson dress that hugged her figure with an effortless elegance. Her auburn hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her green eyes scanned the room with the same mixture of confidence and vulnerability that had captivated him years ago. But what struck Alex wasn't just Sophie. It was the small boy clutching her hand. He couldn't have been older than 4, with tousled dark hair and a strikingly familiar set of piercing blue eyes, the same shade as Alex's. The chatter in the room dulled as Sophie began to move through the crowd. People turned to look, whispering amongst themselves about the striking woman and her adorable companion. Alex's heart pounded as questions flooded his mind. Who was the boy? Why did he look so much like him? And why, of all nights, had Sophie chosen to bring him here? Before he could think of an answer, Sophie spotted him. Her lips parted in surprise, and for a fleeting moment, her composure faltered. Then she squared her shoulders and approached him, the boy still clinging to her side. "Alex," she said, her voice steady but laced with tension, "congratulations on the wedding." His gaze flickered between her and the child. "Sophie," he managed, though his voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Thanks for coming. And this is?" Her hand instinctively tightened around the boy's. "This is Noah," she said softly. "My son." The air seemed to thicken. Alex crouched slightly to the boy's level. "Hey, buddy. I'm Alex." Noah studied him curiously before giving a shy smile. "Hi," he murmured, his small voice barely audible. Alex straightened, his chest tightening with every second. The boy's resemblance to him was uncanny. Yet Sophie had never mentioned a child, let alone one who could possibly be his. "Can we talk?" Alex asked, his voice low and urgent. Sophie hesitated, glancing at Noah, then at the crowd around them. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," she whispered. "You have a wedding to celebrate." "And yet here you are," Alex countered, his tone sharper than intended. "With a boy who looks exactly like me." She flinched, and for a moment, guilt washed over him. Sophie had always been fiercely independent, and whatever her reasons for bringing Noah, she clearly hadn't done it lightly. "Fine," she said finally, "but not here. Later." Lauren appeared at Alex's side just then, her blonde hair gleaming under the chandeliers. "Alex," she said, her tone clipped. "Who's this?" "This is Sophie," Alex said evenly, "an old friend, and her son, Noah." Lauren's smile froze, her calculating gaze flitting between Sophie and the boy. "How nice," she said, though her voice carried none of the warmth her words implied. "Enjoy the evening." Sophie inclined her head and guided Noah toward a quieter corner of the room. Alex watched them go, his mind racing. Every instinct told him there was more to the story, more to Noah, and he needed answers. Hours later, the ballroom was quieter, the festivities winding down. Alex slipped away from the crowd and found Sophie standing on the balcony, Noah asleep in her arms. She turned at his approach, her eyes wary. "Why did you come, Sophie?" he asked bluntly. She sighed, shifting Noah slightly. "Because you invited me, and because—" Her voice trailed off, and she looked away. "I thought you should meet him." His heart hammered. "Meet him?" He swallowed hard, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Is he mine?" Her silence was answer enough. The night air on the balcony was cool, carrying the faint scent of roses from the hotel gardens below. Alex's heart thundered in his chest as Sophie's silence weighed on him. She cradled the boy, his boy, and her lips parted, but no words came. He took a step closer, the gravity of the moment pulling him toward her. "Sophie," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "don't make me guess. Tell me the truth. Is Noah my son?" She closed her eyes, her expression a mix of pain and resignation. "Yes," she finally whispered. "He's your son, Alex." The words hit him like a thunderclap. For a moment the world seemed to tilt. The noise of the party inside the ballroom faded into a dull hum, leaving only the sound of his pulse pounding in his ears. "How could you keep this from me?" he asked, his voice rising. "How could you hide him from me for 4 years?" Sophie's eyes snapped open, her green gaze sharp and defiant. "It's not that simple, Alex. You walked away from us, remember? Your career, your empire. It was always more important than anything else." Alex's jaw clenched. He remembered their last fight vividly, the way they had hurled accusations at each other like weapons. But he had never imagined that their breakup would mean he'd lose not just Sophie, but a child he never knew existed. "I would have been there," he said, his tone softer now. "If I'd known, I would have been there." Sophie let out a bitter laugh, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "Would you? You were already half a world away when we broke up, Alex. You didn't even notice how much I needed you. How could I trust you to be there for a baby?" Her words stung, but Alex couldn't deny the truth in them. He had been consumed by his ambition, driven by the relentless pursuit of success. The empire he had built had cost him more than he had ever realized. "Why now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why tell me now, on the night before my wedding?" Sophie hesitated, her expression softening as she glanced at Noah's sleeping face. "Because he started asking questions," she said quietly. "He wanted to know why he didn't have a dad like the other kids. And when your invitation came, I thought maybe it was time." Alex ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts a chaotic jumble. He stared at the boy in her arms, marveling at how much he looked like him. The dark hair, the sharp cheekbones, even the way his little hand curled into a fist. It was like seeing a miniature version of himself. "Does he know?" Alex asked, his voice breaking. Sophie shook her head. "No, not yet. I didn't want to tell him until I was sure you'd want to be part of his life." "Of course I want to be part of his life," Alex said, his voice firm. "He's my son, Sophie. How could you think otherwise?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time that evening, Alex saw the cracks in her armor. "Because I didn't know if you still cared," she admitted. "It's been 5 years, Alex, and now you're marrying someone else. Where does that leave us?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Alex didn't have an answer. Not yet. But he knew one thing for certain. Everything had changed the moment Sophie walked through those doors with Noah. The tension between them remained unresolved as they returned to the ballroom. Sophie excused herself, taking Noah to a private lounge arranged by the hotel staff. Alex stayed behind, his thoughts swirling. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite smiles and hollow congratulations. Lauren sensed his distraction but didn't press him, though her icy demeanor suggested she wasn't pleased. Later, as the last of the guests trickled out, Alex found himself alone in the dimly lit ballroom. The remnants of the celebration, the half-empty champagne glasses, the scattered rose petals, felt like a mocking reflection of his fractured reality. Lauren appeared, her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor. "You've been acting strange all night," she said, her tone laced with suspicion. "What's going on, Alex?" He hesitated. Lauren was stunning, accomplished, and everything he had thought he wanted, but tonight, seeing Sophie again had stirred something in him he couldn't ignore. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "It's about Sophie." Lauren folded her arms, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her elbow. "What about her?" "She brought her son tonight," Alex said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "And he's mine." Lauren's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "Yours? Are you serious?" "I didn't know until tonight," he said quickly. "I had no idea she was pregnant when we broke up." Lauren's laugh was cold, almost cruel. "How convenient. So what now? Are you planning to ditch me and play happy family with her?" "No," Alex said firmly. That's not what this is about. But I have a son, Lauren, and I need to figure out how to be part of his life. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was sharp as glass. You need to decide, Alex, because I won't stand here and let her ruin what we have. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. The following morning, Alex arranged to meet Sophie in a quiet cafe near Central Park. Noah was at the hotel with a babysitter, giving them a rare moment alone. Sophie arrived wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans, her auburn hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked tired but composed, her green eyes cautious as she sat across from him. I've thought about what you said, Alex began, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. And you're right. I wasn't there when you needed me, but I want to be there for Noah now. Sophie studied him, her expression unreadable. This isn't just about showing up for birthdays and holidays, Alex. He needs stability, consistency. Are you ready for that? I am, he said firmly. I'll do whatever it takes. She sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. He's an amazing kid, Alex. Smart, kind, and so full of life. But he's also been through a lot. I've tried to protect him from disappointment. You think I'll disappoint him? Alex said, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. I don't know, Sophie admitted. I just don't want him to get hurt. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe around them. Finally, Alex leaned forward, his blue eyes meeting hers. Sophie, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I want to be the father he deserves. And maybe, if you'll let me, I want to fix things between us, too. Her breath caught, and for the first time a flicker of hope crossed her face. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and paled. What is it? Alex asked, his brows furrowing. It's Noah, she said, her voice trembling. He's gone. The world seemed to tilt as Sophie's trembling fingers clutched her phone. Alex leaned forward, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. What do you mean he's gone? Alex's voice was low, urgent, but she was already standing, panic radiating from her every move. The babysitter, Sophie said, her words tumbling over each other. She texted me. She went to check on him in the lounge and he wasn't there. She searched everywhere. Alex shot up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Let's go, he said, throwing a few bills on the table. We'll find him. The ride back to the Waldorf Astoria was a blur of frenzied thoughts. Sophie wrung her hands, her lips moving silently as though in prayer. Alex remained stoic, his mind racing through possibilities. Who would take Noah? Was he just hiding, or had someone... No, he wouldn't let his thoughts go there. When they arrived, the hotel lobby was in chaos. Staff members buzzed around, their faces tense. The babysitter, a young woman with tears streaming down her cheeks, approached Sophie immediately. I'm so sorry, Ms. Bennett, she cried. I only stepped away for a second to get him a snack. I didn't think... Where was he last seen? Alex interrupted, his commanding tone cutting through the noise. The lounge near the ballroom, the babysitter replied. I've searched everywhere. Sophie turned on her heel, already heading in the direction of the lounge. Alex followed closely, his long strides matching her pace. The hotel manager, a wiry man in a crisp suit, intercepted them as they approached. Mr. Kingston, Miss Bennett, he began, his voice tight with concern. We've locked down the premises and alerted security. We're reviewing the surveillance footage now. Good, Alex said sharply. Show me the footage. The manager hesitated. Perhaps you should wait. Show me the footage. Alex's voice was cold and firm, leaving no room for argument. Minutes later, they were crowded into the security office, the surveillance footage playing on a small monitor. Sophie's breath hitched as they saw Noah, his small frame darting across the lounge toward the exit. Pause it, Alex ordered. The image froze, showing Noah holding the hand of a tall man in a dark coat. His face was turned away from the camera. Who is that? Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The manager zoomed in, but the man's features remained obscured. Alex's jaw tightened. We need every available person searching for them now. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of frantic calls, escalating tension, and dead ends. Sophie paced the length of Alex's private suite, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. What if he's hurt? She said, her voice breaking. What if... Don't, Alex said firmly, stepping in front of her. We're going to find him, Sophie. I promise you. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears. For a moment, the animosity between them faded, replaced by shared desperation. The door burst open and Lauren strode in, her face a mask of icy fury. "What the hell is going on, Alex?" she demanded. "Your son goes missing, and suddenly the entire hotel is in lockdown. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" Alex's temper flared. "This isn't about appearances, Lauren. A child, my child, is missing. That takes priority over everything, including your precious reputation." Lauren's eyes narrowed, but she held her tongue, clearly realizing that pressing the issue would only worsen the situation. Instead, she turned her attention to Sophie. "This is your fault," she said, her tone venomous. "If you hadn't brought that boy here—" "Stop," Alex snapped, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Blaming Sophie won't help find Noah." Lauren looked as though she wanted to argue, but she wisely left the room, slamming the door behind her. Sophie collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "This is all my fault," she said, her voice muffled. Alex knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, it's not," he said gently. "We're going to fix this. Together." Hours later, a breakthrough came. The hotel security team found new footage showing the man and Noah leaving through a service entrance. A black SUV had picked them up moments later, its license plate partially visible. "I know that car," Alex said, his voice low and dangerous. Sophie looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "It belongs to Randall Sharp," Alex said, "an investor I cut ties with last year. He's been trying to sabotage me ever since." Sophie's eyes widened. "You think he took Noah to get back at you?" Alex nodded grimly. "It's the only explanation that makes sense." He immediately called his head of security, issuing rapid-fire orders. Within minutes, they had traced the SUV to a remote warehouse on the outskirts of the city. "We're going," Alex said, grabbing his coat. "Wait," Sophie said, panic flaring in her eyes. "What if it's dangerous?" "I won't let anything happen to him," Alex promised, his voice firm. "Stay here, I'll bring him back." But Sophie shook her head. "No, I'm coming with you. He's my son too." Alex hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close to me." The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. Alex's security team moved in first, securing the perimeter before giving the all-clear. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and dust. Sophie clung to Alex's arm as they navigated the maze of crates and machinery. A child's cry pierced the silence. Sophie's heart leapt. "Noah!" They rounded a corner and found him sitting on a crate, his face streaked with tears. He ran towards Sophie the moment he saw her, throwing his arms around her neck. "Mommy!" he sobbed. Sophie clutched him tightly, her tears mingling with his. Alex knelt beside them, his hands trembling as he cupped Noah's face. "Are you okay, buddy?" he asked, his voice cracking. Noah nodded, sniffling. "I was scared." Before they could fully process the relief, a shadow fell over them. Randall Sharp stepped out of the darkness, his smirk as cold as steel. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Look who decided to crash the party." Alex rose to his full height, his stance protective. "This ends now, Randall. Let's settle this like men." Randall chuckled, clearly unfazed. "Oh, I think I've already won. You've got everything to lose, Alex. Your business, your reputation, your family." But Alex didn't flinch. His security team moved in swiftly, disarming Randall and ensuring he was taken into custody. As the chaos settled, Alex turned to Sophie and Noah. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Later, back at the hotel, Noah was fast asleep in Sophie's arms. Alex watched them from across the room, a mixture of relief and guilt washing over him. "You saved him," Sophie said, her voice breaking the silence. Alex shook his head. "We saved him," he corrected. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, the distance between them seemed to fade. Sophie hesitated, then said, Maybe there's still a chance for us." Alex's heart swelled, but before he could respond, Sophie added, "If you're willing to fight for it." "I will," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction. The Waldorf Astoria's lavish penthouse suite was cloaked in silence. Noah slept peacefully in the adjacent bedroom, while Sophie stood at the expansive window staring at the city lights. Her crimson dress from the night before had been replaced by a soft cardigan and jeans, yet she radiated the same quiet strength Alex had always admired. He sat across the room, nursing a glass of whiskey, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing heavily on his chest. They hadn't spoken much since returning to the hotel. There was relief, certainly. Noah was safe, but an unspoken tension lingered, thick and unresolved. Finally, Sophie broke the silence. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. Alex looked up, startled. "What for?" "For keeping Noah from you," she said, turning to face him. "You didn't deserve that. No matter how hurt I was, you had a right to know." He stood, crossing the room to stand in front of her. "You were protecting him," he said gently. "And I wasn't exactly Father of the Year material back then. I get it, Sophie. I do." She smiled faintly, but her eyes shimmered in a great fire. "I see that now." Alex reached out, brushing a strand of hair. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a jolt. He wanted to bridge the gap that still lay between them. Or he could. The door to the bedroom, Noah shuffled in, rubbing his "Mommy," murmured sleeper. Sophie bent down, scooping him into her arms. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I had a bad dream," Noah said, his small voice trembling. Alex stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Noah's back. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You're safe now. Nothing's going to hurt you." Noah's gaze flickered to Alex, his blue eyes wide and searching. "Are you my daddy?" he asked suddenly, his innocence cutting through the room like a knife. Sophie froze, her arms tightening around him. Alex crouched down, meeting Noah's gaze at eye level. "Yes," Alex said firmly, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "I'm your dad, Noah." The boy studied him for a moment, then reached out and wrapped his small arms around Alex's neck. Alex held him close, his throat tightening as a wave of emotion threatened to overwhelm him. Sophie watched, her heart aching with a mixture of joy and sadness. This was the moment she had feared and hoped for in equal measure, the moment when Alex stepped into Noah's life, bringing with him the love and protection she had always wanted for her son. The next morning, Sophie woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of laughter. She found Alex and Noah in the kitchen, Alex flipping pancakes while Noah sat on the counter giggling as he helped by sprinkling chocolate chips into the batter. "You're going to burn the pancakes if you keep putting so many chips in," Alex teased, ruffling Noah's hair. "No way," Noah protested, his grin infectious. Sophie leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene with a lump in her throat. It was so ordinary, so natural, yet it felt like a glimpse into a life she had never dared to imagine. Alex looked up and caught her eye, his expression softening. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, stepping into the room. They ate breakfast together, the atmosphere light and easy. For the first time in years, Sophie felt a sense of peace, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. Later that day, Alex took them to Central Park. It was a sunny afternoon, and the park was alive with the sounds of children playing and dogs barking. Alex held Noah's hand as they strolled along the path, stopping occasionally to let him climb on the rocks or chase after pigeons. Sophie trailed behind, her heart swelling with every laugh, every shared moment between father and son. Alex was a natural with Noah, patient and attentive in a way that surprised even her. At one point, Noah ran ahead to join a group of kids playing tag, leaving Alex and Sophie alone on a bench. "You're good with him," Sophie said, breaking the comfortable silence. Alex smiled, his gaze fixed on Noah. "He's an incredible kid. You've done an amazing job raising him, Sophie." She looked down, her cheeks flushing. "I tried my best," she said quietly, "but he deserves more than just me." "You're wrong," Alex said, turning to face her. "He doesn't just need more. He needs us. Both of us. Together." Sophie's breath caught, her pulse quickening. "Alex!" He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I know I've made mistakes, Sophie. I've put my career first for too long. But this, you, Noah, this is what matters. I want to make it right. I want to be the man you and Noah deserve." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She had dreamed of hearing those words for so long, but now that they were here, she was terrified of letting herself believe them. "What about Lauren?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex shook his head. "I ended it," he said simply. "Last night. I told her the truth, that my heart's always belonged to you." Sophie's lips trembled, and before she could stop herself, she threw her arms around him. He held her tightly, his heart pounding as he buried his face in her hair. "I love you, Sophie," he murmured, his voice raw with emotion. "I've never stopped." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her own filled with tears. "I love you too," she whispered. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change and healing. Alex rearranged his life, cutting back on work to spend more time with Sophie and Noah. They moved into a townhouse on the Upper West Side, filling it with laughter and love. Noah adjusted quickly to having Alex in his life, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Alex reveled in the little moments, reading bedtime stories, teaching Noah how to ride a bike, tucking him in at night. For Sophie, it was like rediscovering a piece of herself she had thought lost forever. Alex's presence was steady and unwavering, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alex took Sophie to the rooftop of their building. A table was set for two, adorned with candles and flowers. "What's all this?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide with surprise. Alex smiled, pulling her close. "I wanted to remind you of how special you are," he said. They sat down, sharing a quiet, intimate meal under the stars. When dessert arrived, Alex stood and reached into his pocket. "Sophie," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "these past few months have been the best of my life. You and Noah are my world, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Sophie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss, the city lights twinkling around them. Their wedding was small and intimate, held in a garden surrounded by their closest friends and family. Noah served as Alex's best man, proudly carrying the rings down the aisle. As they exchanged vows, Sophie felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. This was her family, her forever. When the ceremony ended, Alex swept Sophie into his arms, their laughter mingling with the cheers of their guests. "I told you," he whispered in her ear. "We were always meant to be." And as they danced under the stars, surrounded by love and laughter, Sophie knew he was right.